This man claps a new girl every day in a wild time loop, but he is bored. Until he meets a girl he likes, but she has a secret. Together, they push the limits, from wrecking weddings to dodging a psycho villain who tortures Niles for revenge. What's the girl hiding, and why is this villain so hell-bent on revenge? Find out in this mind-bending, chaotic adventure recap of Palm Springs. The movie begins with Niles waking up in bed. He looks tired and stares at the ceiling. The sun shines through the window, but Niles doesn't seem happy about it. He looks like he doesn't care about anything. He gets out of bed slowly, not caring about how he looks. For Niles, this day is just like all the others. He's trapped in a time loop, repeating the same day over and over. His girlfriend tries to motivate him to get ready and dress well, but he knows it doesn't matter. After getting up, Niles goes to a wedding. It's Tala and Abe's wedding, and it's outside in the sunny Palm Springs desert. Everyone is laughing and having fun. The guests are dressed nicely and ready to celebrate. But for Niles, none of this matters. He knows the day will repeat again and again. He doesn't even dress for the wedding, just wears his Hawaiian shirt and swim trunks. It looks like he's going to the beach instead of a wedding. He's done this day so many times that he doesn't care about how he's supposed to act. As the wedding goes on, Niles just goes through the motions. He's seen it all before. He grabs a drink from the bar because he knows exactly where it will be. For Niles, everything is the same. He knows what everyone will say and do. This makes life feel boring and meaningless to him. Then, he sees Sarah, the maid of honor and Tala's sister. Sarah looks uncomfortable. She isn't enjoying the wedding, and it shows. She drinks and rolls her eyes at the speeches. Sarah looks like she doesn't want to be there. Niles notices her right away. After living the same day over and over, Sarah is someone new. As the wedding continues, it's time for the maid of honor to give a speech. Sarah is supposed to do it, but she's not ready. She hesitates. Niles steps in and grabs the microphone. Niles doesn't give a normal speech about love and marriage. Instead, he talks about how life can be chaotic and unpredictable. He says that even though life can be hard, finding someone to share it with makes it better. At first, the guests don't know how to react, but soon they start to like Niles' speech. He's funny and smart at the same time. His speech makes people think, but it also makes them laugh. For Sarah, Niles is different from anyone else at the wedding. She watches him from the side and feels like he really understands life. His words touch her in a way that the rest of the wedding hasn't. For Niles, Sarah stands out because she's different from the other guests. The other people are happy to be at the wedding, but not Sarah. Niles is curious about her. Niles walks over to Sarah and introduces himself. He makes a joke about the speeches being the best part of weddings. Sarah smirks. She gets the joke and plays along. There's a connection between them right away. Niles feels like Sarah understands how strange everything is. They start flirting and making jokes with each other. Their flirting becomes more playful, and they feel even more connected. Niles' carefree attitude makes Sarah feel free too. She has spent the day feeling trapped as the maid of honor, but now she feels like she can break away from that role. Niles suggests they leave the wedding and do something more fun. Sarah agrees, feeling adventurous. She's been feeling stuck all day, and now Niles offers her a way to escape for a little while. They get intimate, but Sarah asks if Niles' girlfriend wouldn't feel bad, so he takes her to his girlfriend, who is already busy with someone else. So, they head back to the desert. But as they walk deeper into the desert, sparks fly between them, and just as they are about to get closer, an arrow flies through the air and hits Niles in the shoulder. Sarah is shocked. She watches as Niles falls to the ground, hurt. Before she can understand what's happening, a man named Roy appears with a bow. Roy is angry and is chasing Niles. Sarah doesn't know why. Niles looks like he's used to this. He doesn't seem too surprised by the attack. Roy taunts Niles, clearly enjoying making him suffer. Niles, still in pain from the arrow, gets up and starts running. Roy chases him. Niles runs toward a glowing cave in the distance. He tells Sarah not to follow him. Niles stumbles toward the cave, desperate to get away from Roy. The cave is glowing with strange light. Just before he enters the cave, Niles turns to Sarah. He looks serious for the first time and warns her again, "Don't follow me." But Sarah is too curious. She's still in shock from seeing Niles get shot, but she doesn't want to let him disappear. Even though he warned her, Sarah enters the cave after him. As Sarah steps into the cave, everything changes. The glowing light surrounds her. For a moment, everything is dark and confusing. At first, Sarah is completely disoriented when she wakes up the next morning, lying in bed. She thinks she must be dreaming or hungover, but when she looks around, everything feels too real. She checks her phone. It's the same day. As she goes through her morning routine, things start to seem eerily familiar. The same snide remark from her parents, her father knocking on the door and reminding her about the wedding. She brushes it off at first, thinking it's just some kind of intense déjà vu. But as the day progresses, Sarah's confusion deepens. She goes to Niles, who is chilling in the pool, and jumps in to confront him. She watches as her sister, Tala, accidentally chips her tooth while skidding in the pool area. Every detail is exactly the same. She watches her father console Tala, telling her she'll be okay. Starting to panic, Sarah watches everything play out in front of her like she's stuck in a movie she's already seen. She sees Niles again, and everything about him feels oddly familiar. Finally, Sarah can't take it anymore. She confronts Niles by the pool, demanding to know what's going on. Niles, who has been through this countless times before, is calm, almost bored by the situation. He explains to Sarah that they are stuck in a time loop, repeating the same day over and over again. Every time the day ends, whether they fall asleep or die, the day just resets. At first, Sarah doesn't believe him. She's still reeling from the shock of waking up in the exact same moment as the day before. But Niles walks her through what's happening. He's been stuck in the loop for a long time. Weeks, months, maybe even years. He's tried every possible way to escape, running away, acting out, even dying, but it all ends the same way. Niles tells her that the sooner she accepts it, the easier it will be to live with. At first, Sarah stays mad at Niles for dragging her into the loop. She feels like he ruined her life. Desperate to escape, Sarah heads to the glowing cave where it all started. She drives through the desert, hoping to find a way out. When she reaches the cave, the entrance is blocked by rocks, but after an earthquake, the rocks shift and the cave door opens. Just as Sarah is about to enter, Niles appears and starts mocking the situation, pretending to be the Antichrist. He jokingly declares himself a god of destruction, laughing at the absurdity. Sarah, frustrated, ignores him and steps toward the cave but realizes there's no real way out. Niles tells her that escaping won't work. They will just wake up to the same day again. Sarah then tries to escape the place by crossing state borders and staying awake. But when she hits a motel, she falls asleep and wakes up back at the wedding on the same day. Sarah wakes up Niles in his room, and his girlfriend becomes suspicious, not knowing about the time loop. Later, Sarah and Niles are driving on the highway. After Niles shares his theories about the time loop while they drive, Sarah gets frustrated and decides to take control. She suddenly hits the gas, speeding toward an oncoming truck. Niles braces himself, suggesting they could just skip the whole crash and grab a beer instead, knowing the day will reset anyway. But Sarah is set on her plan, and despite Niles' attempts to stop her, they crash. As expected, they both wake up the next morning with the day resetting. Later, they grab the beer Niles had suggested. In the bar, Sarah gets curious and asks who the man hunting Niles was. Niles hesitates a bit and doesn't want to answer. Eventually, Niles explains that Roy was once a guest at the wedding, a distant relative of the groom, Abe. One night, early in the time loop, Niles partied hard with Roy. They drank heavily and did drugs, and during that wild night, Niles made the mistake of showing Roy the mysterious cave. Roy, intrigued by the glowing cave, followed Niles into it, getting trapped in the loop alongside him. At first, Roy enjoyed the idea of endless fun and freedom, but soon, he grew bitter and blamed Niles for trapping him in the loop. Ever since then, Roy has been hunting Niles for revenge, often showing up to cause him trouble and make his day as difficult as possible, knowing they would both wake up and repeat the day all over again. Niles mentions that while Roy lives far away in Irvine, he doesn't show up every day, giving Niles some peace between Roy's appearances. However, whenever Roy does come to Palm Springs, it's always a painful encounter. Roy's revenge has become part of the cycle Niles has learned to live with, though it still bothers him. The conversation continues as Sarah playfully asks Niles about people he's spent time with in the loop. Niles admits to having gotten close to others, including the bartender, Daisy, and Darla, a local woman. Niles recounts these moments with brief, light-hearted flashbacks. Sarah then asks if they had ever been more than friends, to which Niles replies that he doesn't think so, although he's not entirely sure due to the effects of the time loop and forgetting some details. Sarah nods, still curious about how relationships and connections change when every day is a reset. Sarah returns to the wedding, believing that if she makes a significant change, it might help her escape the time loop. During the wedding reception, Sarah whispers something into her sister Tala's ear. Whatever Sarah says causes Tala to call off the wedding, leading to emotional chaos as the wedding is suddenly broken off. As this happens, an earthquake strikes, and for a moment, Sarah thinks that this major disruption might be the key to ending the loop. However, despite the earthquake and the cancelled wedding, the loop doesn't break. Sarah wakes up the next day, once again back at the start of the same day. Once Sarah accepts the loop, she and Niles start having fun with it. Since there are no consequences, they begin to do wild and crazy things. They live recklessly because they know the day will reset. One of the first things they do is steal a small plane. They laugh as they fly it crazily through the air. They don't plan to land the plane safely. Instead, they crash it into the desert, laughing the whole time. They also go out to the desert and shoot guns. Niles and Sarah use the guns to blow off steam. At the wedding, they start to play pranks on the guests. They give weird speeches, spill drinks, and tell lies to confuse people. They dress up in silly costumes and sneak around the wedding like they're on a secret mission. In a bar, they have a dance-off. It's not a normal dance. They've created a choreographed routine that's flashy and ridiculous. The people watching are confused, but Niles and Sarah are having the time of their lives. They even dress up like cowboys and pirates, acting out action movie scenes. It's their way of enjoying the loop by living out crazy fantasies. During one of their conversations while out in the desert, Niles and Sarah see dinosaurs in the distance. This surreal and mystical moment symbolizes the strange, otherworldly nature of the time loop. The dinosaurs appear as they talk about their situation and how they both pretend not to care about being stuck, and they end up making love. After Sarah and Niles share their intimate moment, Sarah wakes up the next morning, not in her own bed, but back in the same room as Abe, the groom. She is immediately hit with shock and guilt, remembering that she had cheated with Abe the night before his wedding, which is now being repeated endlessly due to the loop. The weight of this betrayal, especially towards her sister Tala, fills her with regret. While Sarah is dealing with this internal turmoil, Niles remains unaware of her feelings. He tries to talk casually about the previous night's lovemaking, feeling optimistic and assuming that they are now closer. He's in a good mood, but Sarah feels distant, burdened by the reality of waking up in the same situation, still trapped in the loop and grappling with the consequences of her past actions. As they are driving and having this conversation, a cop car appears behind them, lights flashing. It's Roy, who has returned seeking revenge on Niles yet again. As the tension builds, Sarah makes a split-second decision. She decides to pretend to be a victim, screaming for help to throw Roy off. When Roy approaches their car, thinking he has the upper hand, Sarah suddenly rams the car into Roy, pinning him between the vehicles. Despite the chaos, Sarah and Niles are immediately confronted by another cop, who arrives on the scene. The real cop, unaware of the time loop and their dynamic with Roy, tases Niles and handcuffs both of them, taking them into custody. Sarah and Niles get into a heated argument. Niles, still riding high from their connection the previous night, is shocked by Sarah's behavior and her apparent detachment after they had grown so close. Sarah, overwhelmed by her guilt and frustration with being stuck in the loop, lashes out. In their argument, Niles brings up their relationship, hoping that the previous night meant something. However, Sarah shuts him down, revealing her frustration with the entire situation. Niles, frustrated by Sarah's coldness, argues that they could still be happy in the loop, trying to make the best of it. She accuses him of being selfish for being content to stay stuck in the loop. In the heat of the moment, Niles confesses that he has slept with Sarah several times before she even entered the loop. This confrontation marks a turning point in their relationship. She's tired of the loop and determined to break free, even if it means leaving Niles behind. After the confrontation, Sarah disappears. The next morning, Niles wakes up as usual, but Sarah is nowhere to be found. He goes through the day, searching for her, trying to find her at the wedding and other places they usually went together. Each day, he wakes up and looks for her, but Sarah has vanished. Niles becomes increasingly desperate as he checks every possible spot, only to come up empty-handed. It's clear that Sarah has somehow managed to get away from him, and Niles is left in the loop, alone. After several days of searching for Sarah, Niles becomes more desperate and frustrated that he can't find her. One day, he ends up in Abe's room. As he sits on the bed, lost in thought, he picks up a pillow and notices a familiar scent. When he smells the pillow, it suddenly hits him. Sarah has been staying in Abe's room. This discovery shocks Niles, as it confirms his suspicions about Sarah's guilt and the affair she had with Abe. The pillow's scent serves as a reminder of what Sarah has been struggling with, the betrayal. Niles becomes more desperate and emotional. He rushes to the wedding venue where the celebrations are in full swing, but instead of staying quiet, he decides to announce what he has discovered in front of all the guests. Niles, clearly agitated, grabs a microphone and interrupts the proceedings. He dramatically reveals that Sarah has been sleeping with Abe, the groom, right before the wedding. This confession shocks everyone, especially Tala, Sarah's sister, and the bride. This moment creates a rift between the wedding party, further intensifying the drama of the day, while also reflecting how deeply Niles is affected by his inability to find Sarah and stop the loop. In the next loop, after his emotional outburst at the wedding, Niles chooses to go with the flow and avoids disrupting the event. Instead of making any dramatic announcements or trying to change the day, he plays along quietly, feeling more defeated than ever. Later, Niles decides to visit Roy at his home in Irvine, seeking answers or some kind of resolution. When Niles arrives at Roy's house, Roy is surprised to see him. He isn't his usual vengeful self. Instead, he's puzzled and calm. Niles finds Roy living a quiet, peaceful life with his family, a stark contrast to the vengeful Roy who hunts him down in the loop. Niles, reflecting on his own frustration, asks Roy how he can live this way, knowing he's trapped in the loop. Roy explains that after some time, he has come to terms with the loop. He cherishes the small, beautiful moments, like spending time with his family, knowing they will repeat every day. Though he'll never get to see his children grow up, he's learned to appreciate the permanence of these moments. This conversation with Roy gives Niles a different perspective on the loop. Roy, who once sought revenge on Niles, has found a way to find peace and meaning in his endless day. We then shift to Sarah's side of the story. Sarah confronts Abe, the groom, about their past affair. She calls them both out for being shitty people, acknowledging the hurt they caused by betraying her sister, Tala, just before the wedding. Sarah's guilt has been weighing on her heavily. Sarah distances herself from Niles even more and starts studying quantum physics. She dives into science, trying to understand the loop and how to escape it. She spends her time watching lectures, reading books, and doing research. She thinks she can find a way to break the loop if she learns enough. She even consults a physicist, explaining her situation without giving away the details of the loop itself. Sarah conducts an experiment. She captures a goat, brings it to the cave, and uses the anomaly to see if sending the goat into the loop will confirm her hypothesis. The next day, when Sarah wakes up, she goes to check on the goat, only to discover that it's gone, meaning her theory might actually work. After successfully testing her theory with the goat and developing a plan to break the loop, Sarah returns to Niles. Niles immediately apologizes for the fight. Niles, who has been searching for Sarah and realizing how much he cares for her, is eager to make things right. Sarah, in turn, explains everything she has learned. She tells Niles about her deep dive into quantum physics, her consultation with a physicist, and the experiment she conducted with the goat. She shares her theory that by using explosives in the cave, they can disrupt the anomaly and escape the loop. Sarah lays out the plan carefully, explaining how she believes it will work based on everything she has studied. But when Niles hears the plan, he's hesitant and reluctant to leave the loop. Despite everything they've been through, Niles has grown comfortable in the repetitive, consequence-free existence of the loop. He tells Sarah that while the loop may not be perfect, at least it's predictable, and in a way, he's afraid of the uncertainty that comes with breaking free. Sarah, however, refuses to accept this. She tells Niles that staying in the loop forever would be meaningless, and she needs to break free, no matter how scary the real world might be. After their heated conversation about escaping the loop, Sarah makes it clear that she is leaving, whether Niles joins her or not. She says a heartfelt goodbye to Niles, explaining that she needs to break out of the loop and face reality, even if it means doing it alone. She knows that life outside the loop will be uncertain, but she's determined to move forward. Later, at the wedding, Sarah delivers a heartfelt speech. This time, instead of her usual detached attitude, she speaks genuinely from the heart, apologizing for the things she's done and wishing her sister Tala all the happiness in the world. It's a moment of closure for her, symbolizing her readiness to leave the loop and embrace the unknown. Meanwhile, Niles, sitting at the bar, drinks alone, contemplating Sarah's decision. He feels conflicted, knowing that he loves Sarah but still grappling with his fear of change. As he drinks, he makes the impulsive decision to steal a truck from the wedding's owner, determined to find Sarah before she leaves. Niles runs into the gun-toting ranger, who he has encountered multiple times in the loop. Niles makes up a story to distract him, trying to stall for time as he heads to the cave. Niles reaches the cave just as Sarah is preparing to set off the explosives to disrupt the time loop. In a climactic moment, Niles finally decides to join her. He admits that he's scared of the future, but he doesn't want to live without her. Niles realizes that being with Sarah, even with all the uncertainties that come with real life, is worth the risk. Together, they walk into the cave, hand in hand, ready to face whatever comes next and break free from the loop once and for all. Niles and Sarah wake up in a pool, floating on rafts. The sun is shining, and they are finally free. They are no longer stuck in the time loop. The owners of the house come, indicating it is the next day. They feel happy, but also a little unsure of what comes next. In a surprise twist, Roy shows up at the wedding. He's still stuck in the time loop and doesn't know that Niles and Sarah have escaped. He approaches Niles, but Niles doesn't recognize him. Since Niles is no longer in the loop, he has no memory of Roy. Roy is confused at first, but then he realizes what's happened. Niles and Sarah must have found a way to break the loop. This gives Roy hope that he can escape too.